Alrighty, are we finally looking at World War III? Has Russia launched an attack on the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? Not so fast. And that's not just coming from me. That's not, your favorite Putin puppet on YouTube, the Sultan of Smug, telling you that you should be skeptical of this. The White House, and yes, even NATO itself, as an organization, is holding their fire for now. They're saying, you know what? We don't know exactly what happened. They're not immediately coming out and condemning Russia, which is interesting. They're holding meetings, and they're saying, you know what? It's essential that we gather all the facts before making any pronouncements. Now, to me, what that says is that this probably wasn't a false flag from the U.S., which would have been my first instinct, considering what we've seen over the last couple of months. Remember, the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up. It seems pretty much by the U.S. that there aren't really any options. I mean, the story that Russia blew up its own pipeline, that didn't really hold water. So that was directly a U.S. attack on a NATO ally, Germany. And then we had this explosion in Istanbul, which is another NATO ally. The Turks are blaming that directly on the United States. Turkey, America's NATO ally, is openly saying that the United States is behind this bombing in Istanbul, which I didn't even talk about because we have the election going on here in the U.S. and all that chaos. Now we have reportedly 2 missiles dropping in Poland. We've seen craters. We've seen, big fires and plumes. Seems like there was certainly some kind of big bomb that went off in Poland. The question is, who done it? Where did this explosion come from? Was it a missile? If so, what kind of missile? And where was it fired from? The Ruskies are not coming out and immediately saying, oh, this is an American false flag, or, oh, this is, Ukrainian provocation, although they kind of hinted at that. What they said was directly, we have no idea what happened. But they said, hey, could be Ukrainian provocation, which they could say that about anything. But it's interesting, both sides, the U.S., Washington, and Moscow, Russia, are saying, we don't know what happened. And we got to gather the intel and the data and figure out. We got to find the facts, and then we're going to start drawing conclusions. Again, I would expect, like we've seen in the past, when something happens that it seems provocation. Normally, you would see people immediately get into their corners and blame the other side. America immediately would say, "Oh my gosh, this is Russia. Russia is attacking NATO. This is unconscionable." And if this was a false flag, you would expect them to say that. Why would they delay it? If the point of your false flag is to make it look like, hey, Russia blew this up, well, then you would say that outright. You wouldn't obfuscate and say, well, let's wait. No, you don't want to wait. The whole point of a provocation of a false flag is to strike while the iron is hot. You want to get people upset, and then immediately, just like on the day of 9/11, when 9/11 happened, I'm not saying 9/11 was a false flag. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying, on 9/11, day of, the news was talking about how Osama bin Laden has to pay. He's got to be the one behind this. We all know that. Even though there wasn't, there could have been anybody, not necessarily Osama bin Laden. He's one guy on the planet. There were lots of people who could have been behind the 9/11 attack on 9/11. Really, I mean, literally, all it was were 2 planes, or multiple planes, flew into buildings. That's our official narrative. And you don't know who was piloting them because they were blown up. Now, magically, the IDs of the supposed pilots were recovered, just happened to rain down from the sky, weren't incinerated when the planes hit the buildings. I'll let you folks, believe that. But anyway, my point is, we didn't have all this about, oh, we can't jump to conclusions and all this. No, it was immediately, we're going to go get the people who knocked these towers down, and we're going to make sure they hear from all of us soon, or something, whatever Bush's speech was that he gave. And who knows, maybe we'll get that later tonight. Maybe Joe Biden will come out and make a primetime address and say Russia has attacked democracy itself. by striking NATO, and we must strike back. But we're not hearing that yet. And to me, that signals that they're actually taking this seriously, that this is not a joke, that there were some missiles that landed on the wrong side of the border. We're told this is near the Ukrainian border with Poland. Possible that this was a mistake. If it was a mistake, I would hope that the Ruskies would come out and say, hey, didn't mean to do that. Oops. We're not attacking NATO. I would hope if that were the case, that's what the Ruskies would say. Currently, the Ruskies are saying, we have no idea what happened. We had nothing to do with this. And so if they're saying that, I hope that's true. Because, I mean, it's always possible that mistakes get made, especially when there's a war going on. This close to big enemies, a lot of tensions. And Poland, of course, is a belligerent in this war already. Poland has been directly assisting Ukraine in its war. So it's not like Russia has no reason to bomb Poland. Now, they didn't bomb anything in particular. They blew up a tractor that was pulling a grain cart, it appears. At least that's what one of the missiles hit. So to me, this does not seem like there was anything being targeted. It's not like they blew up a power station or they blew up a military base. This just seems like some missiles landed in a random spot. And to me, that's not World War III. World War III is an actual attack on something important. This sort of thing, I think both sides, hopefully there's enough reasonable people left on both sides to say, you know what, this is not what we want to end the world over. Because literally, it would be the end of the world if you have Russia go to war with NATO. Because what's Russia going to do? Well, Russia, if they get invaded by NATO, they're going to launch nukes. That's what they would have to do. Russia by itself is too small to take on all of NATO, especially when they're bogged down fighting in Ukraine. So one tractor gets blown up in Poland and a couple of people die. Do we want to end the world over that? Probably not. I don't think that a couple of farmers getting blown to bits in Poland is the end of the world. Now, I feel very bad for those two people who got blown up. That sucks. It's terrible. I think wars are awful. I'm not a fan of Raytheon and people who make bombs because they blow people up. More often than not, bombs blow up innocent people, not bad people. And so I think I'm surprisingly sanguine about this. I would have thought that if something like this happened, I would have been much more freaked out. But I'm not, because this is... Perhaps I erroneously have faith in the rationality of the West. But I don't think that this is enough. I mean, it's a big step. It's a big step. Now, then again, if you have people in power who believe that there can be a limited conventional war with Russia and that somehow Russia will allow itself to be defeated without resorting to using nuclear weapons, then maybe we'd be in a lot of danger, because then maybe there are some people inside NATO saying, no, this is our time. We have to strike out against Russia. And maybe they'll say, here's another dangerous thing. Maybe not declare total war on Russia, but engage in retaliatory strikes. What if we have American missiles landing in Russia? Or perhaps American missiles or even American troops engaging the Russians in Ukraine. That would be a response that would escalate this much closer to World War III. I think if you get Western troops officially, boots on the ground, Americans fighting in Ukraine on an official basis. Currently, there's Americans fighting in Ukraine on an unofficial basis. But if you put, the 118th Airborne or something that they have stationed in Romania right next door, you send those guys into Ukraine to get mowed over by the Ruskies because they're lightly armed. Or even if you have them in rear echelons, I mean, that's how is that not World War III at that point? So we're extremely close, and there's not enough people who want to avoid it. I think that's another big issue here. It's an issue that we didn't have in the Cold War. In the Cold War, obviously there were enough people who didn't want to go to war, particularly Reagan and Gorbachev. They were not interested in that. Kennedy was not interested in it, although we saw what happened to Kennedy, so there were plenty of people, certainly in the Pentagon, who were interested in going to war, but they were reined in, thankfully. They were kept on a leash. Nowadays, the Pentagon is run by wokesters who believe that Russia hacked our democracy, that Russia is our mortal enemy, and that they will never be safe until Russia has been completely dismembered and turned into 40 different ethno-states. But hey, if I was constantly pessimistic about everything, I wouldn't have a reason to live. I would just be too down in the dumps. There's so many things I'm pessimistic about already. I can't afford to be pessimistic about World War III. My psyche can't handle that. But in all seriousness, I don't think that this is enough. This is not enough. We will have to see what NATO's response is. If NATO responds in kind, then we could start down that escalation ladder. And that's what you got to worry about. It's not any one act that is going to set off a third world war. It's what is the immediate repercussion? What is the immediate reaction to that act? And it won't be remembered. 40 years from now, nobody will remember, these intermediary reactions if we end up at World War III. What people will remember is the end result, which will ultimately be the total annihilation of human civilization. So I hope that cooler heads prevail, as they say, and that this can be handled in a smoke-filled room somewhere and not out in the open, not on the battlefield. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow, hopefully, assuming we all don't get nuked in our sleep.